Welcome to the podcast at the Citadel. I am Donnie Fan. Today it's really exciting. I'm just got to New York City. I am staying at my family's home from high school, which actually is not in New York City. I got to New York City first. Then I went out to Connecticut to see my family, who I have not seen in 7 years. And they stuck me in my high school bedroom with a futon that I have no idea what's happened on it in the last 8 years. I don't really want to know. It's pretty disgusting. I'm not going to show you guys. Maybe I'll take a picture of it. But I am here on my world tour, Journey Back West. And I just got here into the United States from doing 2 shows, one in Vancouver and then one in Toronto this past weekend on August 12th at the Second City John Candy Box Theater with Boo Boo Chinese Comedy Club. So it's been really exciting. And what I wanted to do today, just because I'm still feeling really high, I'm feeling really hyped from the shows that I did in Toronto and Vancouver. What I want to do is I want to bring up a very good friend of mine, somebody I care a lot about, one of the better comedians that I've come across in my life. Used to be very involved in running and promoting the Chengdu Comedy Club in China. He is now back in his hometown in Toronto, trying to get back into comedy. And I was very excited to ask him to open for me. I'm very honored that he said yes. And better than that, he let me stay at his house for free for basically a week in preparation for my show. So without further ado, I would love to bring into the chat Mr. Jacob Wanuch.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hello, thank you for having me on your channel for my podcast, for my YouTube. For anybody who doesn't know, this is Jacob's really good at the technical stuff, and by that meaning he knows the very basics, and I don't. So, Jacob, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, a little bit tired, but happy. Pretty. I feel pretty good about what we did, I would say.
Yeah, so it's
mainly what you did, but
no, you were very much a part of it. You set the tone, right? So today's Tuesday. No, today's not Tuesday. Today's Monday. I don't have any sense of time. Time is just gone. Today is Monday. It's Monday evening, and we had our show together on Saturday night. In the time between then, I got on a plane. I was in New York. I was on like 3 hours of trains going from JFK Airport to be able to get to upstate New York, and then get into my mom's car to go to Connecticut. So it has been kind of a whirlwind. I haven't really been awake for too much of it, but I'm still feeling the highs. How do you feel now 2 days after our show?
Yeah, I still feel like really good about myself. And like there's nothing else really going on in my life that I should feel that good about. And so yeah, I'm riding this one. I think part of it was I didn't really know what was going to happen in there. It's like the first time doing a show where people have actually bought tickets in Toronto in a Canadian market. And so that was a little scary.
So let's introduce people to you a little bit, because you are not a stranger to performing in China, in Beijing. You're not a stranger to performing with me. Now I've performed more with you in different cities than anybody else, by far. It's not even like debatable.
Yeah.
So why don't you, can we get a little bit of an introduction to who you are, what's your background in comedy, and maybe a little bit about the Toronto scene, and what your expectations and feeling of it were before we performed together.
Sure. So I started getting into comedy about 6 months before the beginning of the pandemic, very bright-eyed and excited. And, it took me, I would say, 3 to 6 months to find my legs in that before I was comfortable performing. And then after the pandemic, I ended up sort of having to take over large day-to-day operations for the scene in Chengdu and to keep all of that going, and ended up just kind of being one of the organizers for Chengdu Comedy Club for the next 3 years after the pandemic started. And during that time, performed a bunch of places, toured a little bit, then met you, toured a little bit more. We did Kunming, which was really a lot of fun. Hadn't had shows there in a while, I don't think. And we did, I don't think we did Chongqing together, but we've both done Chongqing, yes?
Yes. We actually haven't performed in Chengdu or Chongqing together, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
All things considered.
That is a bit wild, yeah. You brought me out to Beijing. That was a lot of fun, both shows. Say what you will about a quiet matinee in the suburbs. I had fun.
That front row really liked you. The front row really liked you.
Oh yeah, just crowd working through people's hangovers.
For sure. So you left. When did you leave China?
So I left China right before, like literally a day or two before you started filming the specials for iQIYI. It would have been December 15th or something. I flew out, and yeah, just as China decided, actually, we can let people back in again. I was like, bye forever. Came back to Toronto, and I did at first try to get into the scene a little bit here, knowing I was going to be getting in at ground level, starting from zero again. I figured that's fine. I've got the skills that I have. I've got the ability and the jokes that I've written. I'm sure I can figure out my way through this open mic scene. But then it was, inconvenient transit to get anywhere. And then the open mics were just comedians, no audience. Like, people were so happy if they had 2 audience members. And then these shows would last 3 hours of just comics telling the same jokes that all the comics I've heard before to other comics. And it was not fun.
But for you as a new comic in Toronto, don't you kind of get them all as a fresh audience, or are they just tuned out for who's performing?
I think a lot of people are just tuned out, especially if they're comics waiting for their spot. And even if they aren't, they're always, I think a lot of comics have this kind of critical, especially when they're trying to break through, have this critical, oh, was that better than the joke that I'm telling, or something like that. It's just the worst possible audience you could have is other comedians. And it's fine if there are comedians in the room with you, as long as there's an audience that the comedians can take their laughter cues from and be like, okay, that was a good joke. You know what I'm saying?
So have you had that, when you got here and you're watching different comics and you're trying to get into the open mics, you kind of feel since you were a producer, you were kind of a bigger name. You kind of acknowledged, I guess, that you were going to be less prominent, but you figured you could navigate it. Did you feel it was beneath you or something at all, or how did you feel going backwards?
So I didn't feel like it was beneath me. I did feel like I had done something to serve my time already and develop certain skills, but at the same time, even the mics I was going to, I would say it would be rare that I would be the person with the best set of the night. It might happen, but very often there'd be someone with just a really tight, clean, good set that just slapped from start to finish. And
now, are those professional comics, or are those guys just trying to work real hard at the open mics?
I think that these are people who are getting spots. I don't know that they're doing headliners or anything like that, but I think they're probably getting spots. I think they have a tight vibe for sure. And I'm not going to begrudge them that. I think also I saw people experimenting, having fun, and I always respect that. For me, it was never about getting big. It was just something I did because I really enjoyed doing it. And so basically the reason I kind of stopped going to a lot of these mics is just it wasn't really fun for me anymore. There wasn't much of a community around it. Not nearly in the same way that Chengdu was.
So I think a lot of people don't understand this both in China, I guess, and out west. I think both sides take kind of for granted what the scene is. In China, I think most of the comedy communities are very tight-knit, right? Everybody's, knows each other. You see each other all the time. You hang out outside comedy. You support each other. And out west, it's just like the rat race, right? It's just like we gotta move to mic to mic to mic. We gotta do our own thing. You don't hope for success for other people, because success for other people means you have less time, possibly. And it's kind of funny because where I say like it sounds like, oh, China's way better, but not necessarily either, right? Because you can like fall into complacency when you're in that kind of like tight-knit group. Like people aren't always on their toes and always working really hard to develop new skills or new jokes and whatnot. So like if you do have a preference, I guess you're saying your preference is China though, because you're more for the community.
Yeah, I'm in it for the reward of like the community. I mean, I enjoy the performances and like performance medium, but if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't have been doing it in China. And I think we also get like kind of like you were mentioning upsides, downsides. I think the downside is that in China, while we have some really amazing, talented people, I don't know how many people are really gunning for this as a career. And as a result, I think there are some people who are kind of doing it as a hobby and are good at it. But like, we don't get as many people who I think are really giving everything to try and like become the best possible comic they could be. We don't really have the opportunities either, I think, to really refine our jokes quite as much as in the North American market. Because it's always a different audience. You really get the chance to repeat a joke as many times as you want here, I think. And with
for sure,
like a smaller community, you don't get that opportunity as much.
That's kind of what we talked about, though, with the comedy show we went to. Like, it did feel with some of the comics that their jokes, they were just kind of mailing it in, phoning it in. It's just like, that is a problem when you get to do the same jokes over and over, because a lot of times I feel like people can lose their passion for those jokes, right? Like, it felt like the comics on stage were telling these jokes that they have told a million times and aren't really having fun with it. You know, my favorite thing to do when I do comedy, and it happens all the time, and I love watching videos when I'm like cutting and editing videos. It's bad for cutting videos, but it's great for me. Is like when I'm watching me in the middle of a joke, I just break. I just start laughing, like, because I know what I'm going to say is either ridiculous, or I start laughing after I just said something ridiculous. And, you know, like as comedians, we want, like, our job is to make the audience laugh. And when we get the audience to laugh at like really absurd stuff, and you're just on stage like, I can't believe they laughed at that. Like, that's fun, right? But it didn't feel like the show we went to. It didn't feel like those guys were like really having a lot of fun with their material. It did feel kind of like homework. I think to some extent, at times I think it felt like they were at work doing a job, which they sort of were. But that's kind of the magic, though. Right, like the magic for comics is like part of doing that job is we're supposed to be having fun. Yeah, right? Like comics are like, it's when you say to yourself, I'm gonna quit my office job to be a comedian. It's not because being a comedian pays more, right? Like, like you're not getting paid more doing comedy than you are if you're like you know, a bank admin. So we're supposed to do it for fun. So if we're not having fun, if it is like just like, oh, this is just another job, you're probably in the wrong job. Like you probably got to figure something out. But
this is one thing I want to actually add in on behalf of like the quality of the China scene. Is one thing is that I think I know you do this, is like when you get a joke, because you know some of the same people might see the same joke again, you're going to switch the punchline up another time when you perform it. And that means you're always kind of taking a certain risk with that. You're always kind of experimenting, exploring new material. And I think it really does make the writing a lot stronger while still keeping it something that you can bring to the same audiences and they'll still enjoy it.
Well, so what you say just there, oh man, there's two things I want to talk to you about now. Yeah. But I want to bring up a segment. I want to call this segment, I'm going to do it for the rest of my podcasting career, everywhere I go. I'm going to call this segment The Myth of the Tight Five. The Myth of the Tight Five. Because the reason I want to bring it up in response to what you just said is like the Tight Five, everybody and their mother knows or have heard a tight five. And what it means to most people is like, every comedian, you get your spot, you get your spotlight, your shining moment, you get on to perform on stage for like the first time. You have to have the 5-minute comedy set packed with like maybe like 8 to 12 laughs per minute, where you are just like constantly have the audience like rolling on the floor. And once you have that type 5, then everything opens up for you, right? That's kind of what people think.
Yeah.
And I kind of think of it as the myth of the type 5, because I don't think that's really in the modern market the best way to really try to be setting yourself up, like because kind of what you just said into. Well, actually, let me ask you, like, I'm calling this the myth of the type 5. Are you a believer in the type 5?
I think it's a different event. I think type 5 is a sprint, and usually you have to have that in order to get anyone to pay attention to you, because that's the only amount of time you get in a competitive mic market, where like all you ever get is 3 to 5 minutes. And so you have to prove yourself in 3 to 5 minutes to get people to pay attention. Well, then they start recruiting you and ask you to move to middle distance. And so now you're going from like the 100-meter dash to the 400, 800 meter. And you have to start learning how to breathe when you run. And so it's sort of like a different event. And what I think a type 5 does do is it guarantees that you have the ability to look confident on stage. You have the ability to write a punchline. And usually, because I think there are not that many people who are batting 100% on their jokes most of the time. You know, you miss a joke here and there, and the ability to take that in stride. If you can do those 3 things, you can have a type 5. Well, now you move to the middle distance. You're doing like 10, 15-minute sets. And now you have to be able to do it at a pace that is comfortable for the audience. You have to keep their attention for that whole time. I mean, 10 minutes of one-liners, there are some comics who do that, but like it gets a little old. It gets a little monotonous. And well, so I think...
That's a great point, because when you watch, it's so funny, like when you watch a comedy special now, right? They're like 50 minutes to an hour and a half long. Yeah. Right? I've been to comedy shows where the headliner's doing 2 hours. And like that's great. It's a lot of fun. But if you listen to comedy records from like the 80s and 90s and like even early 2000s, a lot of them are like 25 minutes. 32 minutes, like, you know, the big ones are always longer, but like Mitch Hedberg, who's a one-liner comic, a lot of his comedy albums, I think, I could be wrong, but I think they're like between 25 and 35 minutes. And it's just why, because it's really hard to do that kind of comedy for, you know, 45 minutes or an hour, like even 10, 15 minutes. How many times do you see a one-liner comedian come out like just blowing the doors off the house, and they get to like minute 7, and now like people are exhausted, like he's exhausted or she's exhausted or they're exhausted, and then the audience is exhausted, and then it's just kind of like awkward for the last 4, and it's like, ooh, you know, that's like the comedy is good, but they don't have the pacing right, or they haven't figured out, like, you know, I think when that happens, I think there's too much focus on the structure of like some people, like they think they apply the type 5 to like, they try to apply it also to 10 and 15 and 20. And I don't think that's really the right way to do it.
Yeah, you definitely have to learn to like interact with your crowd a little bit more. I mean, it is insane as a medium that like, hey, I'm just going to talk at you for 5 straight minutes. You would not let anyone in your life talk to you for 5 minutes without you getting a word in, you know? And like, it's a weird thing.
A lot of people would say I do that to them.
Just practicing. Everything is stage time.
That's true. I don't know why so many people are like, it's so hard to get stage time. Like, I go to CVS and I just start talking to the cashier.
The world's a stage. Shakespeare said it.
Is that a real quote? Because he's
so. I don't know.
Correct.
Never studied Shakespeare, but I have probably 4 teachers who would resent me saying that. But
Yeah. So I think one of the things about something else I wanted to ask you was you just said that you kind of got unhappy. You became unhappy in the Toronto scene.
Yeah.
And what I definitely want to talk to you about today, because I'm, like I said, I'm still like really riding high from performing in Toronto. What I really want to talk to you about is like how the show went. What you felt, how you felt being on the show. I want to be a little bit narcissistic here because I'm on tour. It's me headlining.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely want to get some perspective on like how you saw the show, how you've just your perspective. Like I really feel like we've grown a lot together in comedy and in the scene because even though you were a bit more established than me when we first performed together in Kunming, you were just kind of getting into your producer role. And I was really like, forcing my way into the producer role. And I just feel like you've been like one of like 3 people who I've been very close to since very early in my comedy career. And so like I want to say it was such an honor and I'm so thankful to have had you perform on the show with me. Yeah, so Toronto, Second City, John Candy Box Theater, like, can you give, we can go back and forth with some things, but just like, overall, what did you think? Like, just whatever you have, if I said, just give us a, recap.
From my point of view, like, you showed up and I really trust your ability as a producer. I mean, like, actually, I was more established than you were when we met. But I would also say that you gave me all of my opportunities after that. Is like the establishment wasn't really giving me anything I wasn't giving myself. And like I was trying to make sure that I was supporting like the other comics and making space for them in Chengdu. So like most of my touring after we met was actually from you producing things. So I have a lot of faith in you as a producer. And then you showed up and you're like, hey, I don't have like a ticket sales place yet for this show. And like, I don't know any details about the show. And I'm like, Donnie, what's going on here? And you're like, tell all your friends, push it to your friends. And I'm like, all right, I'll trust you. So what do I tell my friends? Where are they going?
real quick, I should say, this show did start off very messy. So I was trying, while I'm kind of getting the world tour set up and stuff, like so many things went wrong. It sucks because like in Beijing, I can control everything, right? Like when you're a producer of a comedy show, you're on top of everything. The moment you step out of your room to go to other cities or other countries, it is fucking wild. It's wild. It's no way to know like what is going on or what to expect when you go places. I had set up shows in fucking Indonesia, and then like 2 weeks before the show is like supposed to get going, they're like, "Oh, did you get your work visa for Indonesia? Because you have to get a work visa to perform here." And I'm like, that takes like 2 months to get, and it costs like basically like $300. What the fuck are you talking about? We had been talking since January, and they told me this in middle of July, and I'm just like, it became a mess. And so I was trying to get into Toronto. I was trying to get into these other cities. And I set up Vancouver with a guy named Aki, who is awesome. Aki is amazing. Love this guy. He's running the Chinese club there by himself. Well, not by himself. He has some other people with him who are also really great. And I've met his whole team. But it's called Van Comedy. So he helped me kind of get connected in Toronto a little bit, like kind of like helping push along the things. And I'm working with these 2 girls, Bonnie and Olivia, in Toronto with Boo Boo. Buddha Boo. It's such a hard comedy club name to say. Buddha Boo. And we were talking, like we agreed on everything. And they're like, we were looking at different places to perform, and they're like, "Oh, Second City can have you at their venue. The Second City can have you." And I'm like, that's amazing. They're like, it's going to be really good for your brand. I'm like, absolutely. They're like, we're going to start selling tickets, and you're going to be on the website, send us posters because you're going to be on TV. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then Second City didn't give us anything for like another week and a half. And we started actually selling tickets with the show with only 3 days left, I think. Yeah. I don't think we could actually officially buy tickets until 3 days before the show. So that's what you're talking about. That was a really long-winded way to kind of get into that. But
that's important context.
it's very important context. And 3 days before the show, we did not have a single ticket sold. We were just like, both myself and you were just kind of scrambling around asking people, like kind of pushing them like, hey, you're going to come to the show? Oh, can I buy tickets? No, you can't, but you're gonna at some point in the near future buy tickets. So yeah, you can continue. Sorry.
So that was like my production side of things going in. And I very much was like, look, I haven't seen him perform in a year. He was good when I saw him last. Like,
you're talking about
buy the tickets. Yeah, this is you. I'd seen you perform a total of 4 times prior to, maybe 5 times, 4 or 5 times prior to this show. But you know, like, you've been doing headliners in China. I know that. I know you. I saw you perform before, and so I'm like, yeah, this will be good. I didn't know how the market was going to be, because I know when I came here, some of the jokes that I told there obviously couldn't work at all here. But this was going to be more of like a Chinese Canadian market, and so they would have some of the language and some of the cultural references already. And so if this was there were a few wild cards going in for me, and we got there. Venue was amazing, looked so good, it felt really special. And then
what's your favorite thing
I had a
that
good
you
time performing
in the venue? Like when you got into the venue, what, like, was there anything that caught your eye in the Second City? Other than me being on the TV, that was my favorite. But like, other than that,
that was pretty cool. I would say just like having a sound guy who was like paid to be there, like that. I can't remember the last time. I don't know if I've ever had a sound guy who was paid to be there when I was doing comedy.
We had it at Journey to the West. Journey to the East. We had it at Journey to the East. Yeah, for sure. But that was the different thing.
The green room, actual green room with back entrance. That was insane. Where we're so used to going in the same way as everyone else goes in. And at one point I had to pull you aside and be like, no, we're going in the back this time. We've earned the back door.
We've earned the back door. That sounds
anyways, so there's pressure on in this show. All like a bunch of my friends are there. People I've like reconnected with since coming back. And like all of this is riding on you basically. And so like I get my drink, I'm sitting in the audience, and you're just like nailing it, like every joke, and you're doing it better than I've seen you do it before too, where like you're working in bits of crowd work into the jokes themselves. You're doing callbacks to the crowd work that really work well. You're taking risks with the crowd work that are just like, you know, they're risky and they work, and I love to see it, and people are really having a great time.
Now, by
pretty much from start to finish.
By risky, do you mean me proposing to a audience's mother that I'd like to take her on a date after the show?
Yeah, and I think it went well. Like, look. There was at one point a MILF joke, which was so funny, and that was a risk. I think that was a risk, and I'm so glad you took it, because everyone died.
It was all right. So for context, we had this lovely. There's a lovely audience member who is part of a very prominent a Chinese television network. And her mother was there. And
some of that I didn't know.
Oh yeah, so her mother was there. There's this one woman who is clearly older than everybody else in the room. I acknowledge that. Everybody laughs because she laughs. Like, she's totally cool with that. She's like really cute too. She's just like smiling at everything. I said penis, and she was the only one that laughed. Right? Like, And it was just like, this woman is amazing. She's an amazing audience. So like, yeah, as a comedian, when you have somebody who's right up there in front and like they're willing to go there with you, you gotta keep going there. You gotta keep going back to that well, right?
Yeah.
So she what I told the MILF joke, which did I called her a MILF basically. Everybody laughs, and I felt bad about it. I'm like, oh,
you tried to like dial that one back after too, and I'm like, nah, that was the right thing.
Yeah, I went way past the line. I'm just like, mother, I'd like to friend,
Yeah.
like, and people looked at me like, no, that's not what you meant. That's not what you meant.
That's not what we laughed at. Don't try and take that away from us. But that's one thing actually I'm realizing now is you could see her reactions the whole time. I couldn't. I was like on the side, right? And I think you were the only one who could really see how she was reacting to a lot of this other than the people immediately next to her. And so we don't understand like the level of rapport you had with her at this point. And so to us in the audience, that feels like such an insane thing to say, but to you that made sense in that moment, and I think it did.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I didn't think about that. For some reason, I would have assumed that you guys all knew that
like she was enjoying it.
She was enjoying everything. She was like enjoying every single part. The one thing though that she did too, which was really fun, was she would just you know how sometimes you have those audience members, you ask them a question and they want to tell you all the details.
Yeah.
So like I asked her a question about like how she got to Canada, and she's just like, well, 30 years ago I got here and I got divorced and then I had my daughter, but it's like, what?
Yeah.
Stop. Too much.
Yeah.
But not stop. Like she's not doing it on purpose. It's just like, it's a really funny thing. Like when audience is just like, they want to give you everything, and it's like you don't need to say that much, okay?
Yeah,
please.
For sure.
But
so I think final notes and the kind of the overwhelming impression I got was all of my friends had a really good time. They're really glad they had come. I think everyone felt like they got more than their money's worth, and.
So that means next time I charge more, right? Like,
I think you just do more shows. More shows, yeah. I would call it an absolute success.
So you didn't really mention how you felt about you being on stage, though.
Yeah, that was scary. It was a little bit scary because I've kind of gone into semi-retirement or something here where it wasn't that fun, so I stopped performing mostly, and it was just like a hassle to get places. There wasn't the community connections that I wanted. And maybe I'll start to rethink those a little bit now. The host from the show did get my contact information and mentioned the potential for future cooperation on some shows. And this kind of, I had a great time. My material worked, which is, I guess what's important to me is the references were things that people could still understand. I didn't have to adjust my China material all that much for people to kind of get it here. The tension that you mentioned between local audiences in Canada who don't understand China versus the Chinese audiences who do, and having to explain things back and forth, that's really a fun toy to play with.
So so definitely. So, oh God, now I want to respond to that. So the best part about the tension, there was definitely tension in the room between the Chinese audience and the foreign audience, and maybe that was real or perceived, I'm not sure. The best thing, I think one of my favorite moments of the night was when I just realized I'm telling these jokes and all the white people are sitting in this one area over here in the side and all the Chinese people are everywhere else, and it just looks like, and it's so obvious when a joke is just not in the white area of the room. I shouldn't say just white. Yeah. There was one Indian guy. There was one Indian guy. So, a little bit of diversity in that white area. But my favorite thing is that I consider the Chinese people like my people, and I look at the white guys and I'm just like, those are the foreigners. And it's like, no, those are the locals. But in my mind, they're all the foreigners.
Yeah.
But
in Canada, it's I was talking to another friend of mine who went to the show, and like, there's not really any such thing as a foreigner in Canada. Because like,
everybody is, right?
Well, I mean, to some extent, but it's really difficult to look at someone in Canada and be like, okay, is this person like first generation or second or third or fourth or like 10,000th generation, like on the land, you know? And so
you just have to get in an indigenous joke, don't you?
Well, just because of that, like you really, in China, it's very obvious for the vast majority of foreigners that they are foreigners, and that there's like a culture that they are adapting to, or perhaps, but like likely haven't fully adapted to. Whereas in Canada, the whole thing is just, you know, come, mostly be yourself, you know, and just like hang out here. And so there's not really an in versus out culture. It's like a very much there's no rigid, clear boundary. It's very spread out.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And I felt that. I think I felt that when I was there. But I think I do want to say, I think you're selling yourself short. Like when you got on stage. So for me, my impression is when we got to Second City, the first thing that was like really cool to me was all of the, I guess this is different for you because you weren't on the TV and I was. So some people there did recognize that, oh, I'm the guy who's performing. Yeah. And so like the work staff there, they were all being like really supportive. Like I was just walking by some people and they're like, hey, man, you're on the show tonight, right? Break a leg. And it's like, oh, my God. I feel like when I go to different cities in China, people look at me and be like, I hope to God you fail. You suck, Donnie Fan.
No.
I'm just like, I always feel this pressure. But like I'm at Second City in Toronto, and maybe it's just because they're Canadian, but they're just like all being really supportive, you know? They're just like, you know, go for it, break a leg. The guys who like sell the tickets and stuff, they're like asking me, they're like, are you nervous? How are you feeling? They're really engaging with me. And then I noticed like they have like 3 different theaters, which is also super cool, right? Like I've never been someplace where like I'm performing in one stage while somebody's performing simultaneously in another stage. And what's insane about that to me is like people are going to the ticket office and like, oh, do you want to buy tickets for the famous people on the main stage? And they're like, no, I want to buy tickets for Donnie Fan. And it's like, oh, that's so sick. That's so cool. So like they have a choice, right? It's not like they show up and they're like, well, we are here. No, they actually get a choice for a better option, and they still choose. So I was really excited about that, and like you said, the green room was really cool. But like we go back to the back room, and I just want to kind of like set the scene. Like there's a TV in the back room where you can watch the people perform. So our host of the night, a guy named Sean, who is very cool, really like Sean. Thank you so much for hosting, Sean, if you're listening. Sean's just like this really giant Chinese guy, a Chinese-Canadian guy. And by giant, I mean tall. So he's, you know, he's on the TV and he's opening and like, just like, you know, all the jokes are working. And it's just like, oh, damn, this guy, he's like already like opening up this night and the crowd is having a great time. It's like, you ever feel like when the crowd is enjoying themselves too much, you get nervous? Yeah. Has that ever happened for you?
Oh, interesting. Not really. I tend to like not question when things are going well for me. There have been times where I'm like, this is a little too easy. Like, am I actually doing anything here? Is this actually like me being good at this? But I still like me a hot room.
Well, yeah, of course. I don't know. I'm a cynic. So like my first fear whenever somebody's killing it is like, I'm going to ruin the mood. Like, I always
that
feel
I
that
get.
Especially because I think my style is definitely different. So I do like when I see somebody bombing in front of me, I feel okay because I feel like my style is going to be different enough that when I get on stage, it's like a fresh start and the audience will just be like, oh, this guy is so much better. You know? You that's kind of, I mean, we're all comedians, so we're all narcissists. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this. So, like, I feel that way. But when I watched Sean killed it to open the show, and you get on, and Sean killed it. You fucking massacred them. You did your people dirty. Jacob is indigenous, by the way, to my friends out here who don't know this. So, we love to talk. I don't think I've ever made an indigenous joke in my life until this week in Canada with you. And it was all I talked about.
Because, you didn't have an audience who would understand it or appreciate it.
I still don't. It's still just you. It's all just for you. So you fucking massacred, man. You were incredible. You slayed the room. You did 7 minutes on the dot. And I was starting to have trouble breathing, getting ready to go up after you. And I knew when you were about to get off, I knew because you shared your script with me before, so I knew that last joke coming. Mm-hmm. And I panicked because I'm just like, it's not that I'm afraid to get up after a comedian has success. It's just like, if I don't, you had the peaks were max peak. You had laughs in that room that hit the ceiling. They don't go higher than that. So my fear was like, what if I just get giggles the whole night? And like, I can't match that. And, in some ways, like, if that is a real legitimate fear, if I can't do that, maybe I shouldn't be the one headlining. But
I totally get what you mean.
It's scary though. It's scary every single fucking time. It's never not scary.
I think anyone who does comedy a lot knows, like, if there's some comedian who's going to go on before you who always just crushes it, you always get so nervous going on after that because you're like, all right, well, like, if I don't do better than this person, I should have not been the headliner. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Because again, like, I've never done more than 35 minutes on a stage, I don't think. And I'm not sure I'd be ready to. I know you are absolutely capable of it. And I mean, I'm happy to hear you tell me, like, it was scary going on after that. Because, like, I feel good. You can tell me that all night long if you like.
It was legitimate. And I honestly, reading your script, I liked it. But I also thought, like, some of these are a little, this is where comedy gets weird. This is where I don't want to say this to you, in person, because you might hit me. You've got a 6-pack and everything. So it's very frightful to, like, criticize you in person.
Yeah, but I weigh like 10 pounds, dude. You could take me.
This is true. So, like, I read your script, and there are a couple jokes that I'm just like, this is a pretty simple, basic, very dull joke. I mean, if I can start with your opener, can I say your opening joke? Or
go for it. My opening joke is always like, I keep my hair down when I perform, so it comes like down to about here, and I'll usually open with like, oh, my hair is like now getting long enough that people are starting to call me a hippie instead of Jesus. That's the one you're talking about?
No, that's the opening joke. Here's the thing. It's like, it's so simple. It's so basic. It's like, it's not, the logic's there. But it's just like, if you want to think like, oh, this guy's going to be a pro comic and he's going to get on stage and he's just going to open with a banger. Yeah. Like, it doesn't read as a banger. Yeah. But you go up there and you start it and then people are just like hollering. And it's just like, this is like the fucking opening joke. And it's just, it's where comedy is really funny because there's so much comedy you can read on paper that just doesn't work. Or you think shouldn't work, and then the person gets on stage and it just kills, and like that is a really like big testament to like what people don't see in the work or in the characters we create to get on stage.
So let me ask you about this one because that joke in particular is not one that I ever like really planned on doing. It's not one that I'm like particularly even proud of, to be honest. But it is one that started working and just kept working, and so I kept doing it, so even though I'm like, I don't really get why this is fun for you guys, but you seem to like it, so I will do it. And do you have jokes like that where you're just like, I don't really get why this is funny, but y'all love it, so let's go?
There are so many that I have. I mean, so Nico Too Much, God bless her soul. I love Nico. Nico is, with me at the Comedy Citadel in Beijing. She was with you in Chengdu for a long time. And, as a co-comic, right? Like nothing more. Nico has told me, Nico has seen me perform so many times, and she will tell me, she's like, I don't know why they laugh at that joke. It's so bad and it has no logic. And I'm like, yeah, but I think it has logic.
But they laughed.
They laugh every time. And it's always funny when you hear that from comics too, because it's like there's so much more that goes into laughter than just writing down the proper words. There's so much more. Yeah. And a lot of my jokes are I'm trying to think of like what I can actually tell, but like I have a joke where all I do is yell Obama and people laugh. There's no punchline there. It's kind of surprising. But if you're listening really hard, like it's pretty obvious it's going to go somewhere like that. And I just say Obama and people start laughing. I say, God, what do I say? I do my intro. I do math and they laugh at it. I'm just like, I don't do this so much anymore because my social media is actually growing quite a bit. So I used to do a joke where I say, I have 3 million views on my social media, which is true, but I only have 400 followers. So my mom asked me, she's like, that means 2,999,600 people have seen your videos and said that's enough. And it's like that joke is it's pretty dumb too, right? It's like, yeah, it's pretty obvious that's the number. 3 million minus 400, that's the number you get. And all I'm doing is stating the fact. If they don't follow me, that means that they're saying like that one video was enough. I don't need to keep watching this guy's videos. So all I'm doing is just explicitly speaking out the facts of the joke. And for some reason,
I'm going to push back on this a little bit actually, because you've got characters in this story. You've got yourself. You're setting yourself up to take the fall by kind of like doing the boastful thing, and then you've got your mom there to smack you down. And so there's like this interaction between characters there, between you being like, haha, and then just getting slapped down by your mom. And so like there's tension between the idea of your mom slapping you down when generally be like, oh, like I'm so proud of my kid, I'm going to support my kid. Nope, not Donnie. So like that's what I mean. I think you're selling the complexity of that a little bit short. I don't think the joke is the math. I think the joke is that the pride in the fall.
So you're right. I mean, you're right, because that is why I tell it that way. That is, and it is a follow up to another joke. So it's so you're right, but it's still like it's what I mean, that if you just read it out, if it's just written on paper, maybe you're not feeling that like that's a really strong joke, right? But the audience really goes for it. But maybe you're right. It is the dynamic, the different, Well,
let's say like writing in comedy is like being good with a paintbrush and technicality, but at the end of the day in comedy, you have a different canvas every single night. Yeah. And so if you can't work with whatever canvas you're given that night, you can't really make it in comedy.
That's absolutely true. And it's like every show has been so different. Like it's so funny that like in Vancouver, Vancouver's got to be one of the best shows I've ever done. Start to finish. I have that. It felt like a 60-minute Type 5. It really did. It was just like constant the whole way through. There wasn't a single lull in that show in Vancouver. Like every single moment felt impactful, and yet I liked Toronto more. And it's like, and Toronto did have I know you've given me quite a bit of praise when we were together in person and even just now, but there was definitely some stuff that didn't work in Toronto. Right, it was not all bangers. I was really mad at myself because I messed up the order of my jokes. I 2 different times. I was like, wait, I gotta finish that joke from earlier, guys. Sorry, there's a callback in here I gotta get to. I didn't say that, but like I forgot. Like my callbacks are so important to me. I find it like I don't know if we talked a lot about. I'm really interested if you have the time to talk about this idea of cheating in comedy.
We can get into that.
But I feel like, my comedy set is like the first 30 minutes establish everything that happens in the last 30 minutes. Or maybe it's a little different. Maybe it's like the first 40 establishes everything that's going to happen in the last 20. So I have like 5 different callbacks in the last 20 minutes of my show to the beginning. And the show obviously ends on an implied callback. Where I don't even have to say anything. I let the audience figure out what I'm going to say next, and I don't say it. And it always, that's how I leave, to like a big boisterous laughter, and applause at the end. And I messed up so bad in Toronto that like I had to like revisit the jokes to get back to the callback because I was forgetting the order. So Toronto was not perfect. Vancouver was as close to perfect as you can get. And yet I like Toronto more. And I'm trying to figure out why, but I think it's that like the situation presented adversity for me. And it is the first foreign show I've done with equal or more locals than Chinese in the audience. And one of the big things we're told in China is like our jokes won't work out west. We are not good enough to perform in New York City.
See, I don't actually. So I don't know that anyone actually thinks that we're not good enough to do it. I do think that when we come back, we know we have to start from the beginning and to establish ourselves going through the trenches all over again. But if you ask, like, there is I think a conversation among comics in China who are performing in English of like, do you think, you could make it back west? And I always told people I don't think I would want to, and I think I was right. Fair.
But it was the first, like Vancouver was 98% Chinese, from China. So I didn't have to even second guess if my jokes would work. And the 2 white people in the crowd that night, they were a great point of emphasis for every joke because just got to keep going to them and be like, now let me explain China, which every time I did that, it was a laugh because I'm about to say something that is so ridiculous in cultural differences that like, it's just like, wow, that exists in Canada or wow, that exists in China. But in Toronto, I couldn't do that because it was so even of locals and Chinese. And the adversity came, and it wasn't as bad as I think I'm maybe explaining it to be. A lot of it was internal. A lot of it you guys probably didn't. I hope you guys didn't.
Well, like, okay, I think a lot of the audience who don't do comedy regularly or haven't done it a lot, I don't think they noticed. I think they might have been like, they're not like idiots or anything like that. They do notice like some things. They can tell when there's like a lull. They can tell when things are like a little lower and not working quite as well. But they don't really know what it's like to be on the other end of a show that's not like going according to plan. And so I think there's like something about when you've done comedy, you can really appreciate the artistry in recovering, in pulling something back and doing something new in the moment. And so I think in Toronto, it was probably a scrappier show for you a little bit, but I think that's also something to be more proud of. It's like, I worked with a more difficult canvas. When you get the slip and slide of laughter, you ride it every time, but you're not that proud of yourself for doing it, right?
Yeah, you want to get on that slip and slide when there are rocks and pebbles and maybe a couple heroin needles, just to slide through.
Strewn throughout and be like, look, I avoided disaster. It
is exactly why I feel proud. And honestly, the thing that made the show, that made it slippier, was that the crowd was so much fun, and I was doing so much fun with the crowd work that that's what fucked up my jokes too, right? It's not like I was doing the show and like, oh, this joke didn't work, so I forget what I'm gonna do next. It's like I would just go on tangents with some of the different people in the audience, and it would be really fun and interactive. And then I would start my next joke, not realizing I didn't finish my first joke. And it's like, oh, like what am I gonna do there? And I do think that's something that the audience, they don't follow it because they're not, they're not taking notes. They're not in a lecture course. They're just enjoying it.
Well,
so
they don't have the script ahead of time, right?
Yeah. So, but it is weird that like I'm just like ending some jokes midway through, and it's just like then at the end I'm like I have to go back because that final callback depends on me going back. It's probably the proudest I've ever been after a comedy show. And like, Olivia and Bonnie, if you guys listen to this over at Buddha Boo, you guys were like, for having me there. It's my favorite show I've ever done. It's the show I'm most proud of. It's the show that like on this tour, I kind of felt this way in Malaysia. It's like in Malaysia, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I can do this abroad. I don't only have to do this in China. But after Toronto, I do feel like, my goal and my purpose is, I don't know if anybody's going to believe me. Like, I am a narcissist. I do a lot of this for me. But I very much strongly feel that like doing this comedy tour, going to these different countries from China, not like I moved back west. I'm not moving to New York to like, I'm going to do comedy full time. No, I'm trying to show the world that there's legitimate stand-up comedy in China that can travel, that can fucking travel and go anywhere. And that like we deserve to be recognized. Like China comedians from China deserve to be recognized in the stand-up community. And I think where I'm going, everybody's made the same joke before I go on stage. Have you guys ever heard of Donnie Fan? And the audience is like, no, ha 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 ha. Where we get the joke, like who's Donnie Fan? But after the show, without fail, after the show, everybody's just like, oh man, that was amazing. If we're ever back in China, if we ever go to China, we want to go to see comedy shows there. And it's like, that's the goal. That's like solely the goal, is to raise this awareness about what's going on in China. And the comedians that I'm meeting out here, it's like, they're excellent. These are excellent comedians in these Chinese clubs. And it's like, we got to get you guys to China. We got to get you guys back to the mainland to perform. Like, it's, I don't know. It's kind of a lot. I'm just, jacking myself off over here, like with this, verbal jack off a bitch. I don't know what I'm saying. A jack off a bitch is not a word. But I don't know. That's how I feel. And normally I wouldn't do this. You go.
No, I think China does have like a lot to offer in terms of its English language comedy. I guess the main question that really was holding people back was like, will people understand the material without the cultural references? And so I think that was where a lot of that feeling came from, where people felt you had to like live somewhere in order to be able to tell jokes that would work for that audience. But I think if nothing else, and I don't think it's just this, but if nothing else, you've shown that there is like a market for the same jokes we were telling in China.
That sounds less impressive. It
is, yeah. Yes, but I would also say like you're showing that, if people are doing it in China, they have the skills that are required to do it here. I think you're just like one of the first people who have made that leap and been willing to like really push to get all of this produced, to make it all happen, to say like, I'm coming, give me a show.
Yeah, it's I've definitely I hope it gives opportunities to other people in the future. That's really like the hope. And like even like you, I'm so glad we got you on the show, because you have this platform now, this 7 minutes, where the people who are in there who do these shows, they don't know who you are. And honest to God, usually when a comedian's like, I've got this friend, can I put him on the show? Yeah. it never goes well, right?
Yeah.
Like it never goes well. It's always bad.
Yeah.
It's always like somebody the comic is dating, or like somebody they
Just a
want
friend who's trying to like break into the scene or something.
a friend that they're trying to like just like who's kind of lagging behind it, and it's never good.
I didn't even think about that like going in, right? Because like I guess I'm really used to like when I'm performing in other places like in China, like people always just like knew who I was, and if they were like producing the show, and so like of course like this guy is gonna, well, no, the only time I travel is because I got invited, or because like sometimes in Chongqing I would go because we were still doing like organizing all their paid shows. So like anyone putting on a show that I was in at that point was sending me to go. And this is the first time I've been like, hey, can you like put this random dude you've never heard of onto the show? And I didn't really see that from the producer's perspective at all. I was just like,
yeah, they didn't have a problem.
What did you tell them?
I made it very simple. I just like they didn't have any hesitancy. It's not like they were like, oh, I don't know about it. Like, they're like, oh, it's my show. Like, sure. They just were, let me be aware of the time frame. And so I asked for you to be on, and they told me the time frame and stuff. But I did realize, like, it's a kind of. Did
you tell them I was a comedian?
Yes. I did not say you were going to go do a Magic Mike show. Showing off that indigenous pride. So I told them you were going to be on the show, and the only big drawback was like it cut into the time a little bit, I did have to rush. But I would fuck that. I would give up that time for you to do that every single show ever for the rest of my life.
That.
Like, dude, you are. You were fantastic. You really helped set the tone. You and Sean both helped set the tone for me. And, I owe so much success. I don't know if people, I don't think I do a good job. I think I do a good job of saying it. I don't think I do a good job of letting people feel it. I really hope you do, because we are friends. But like, I really owe, and I appreciate the success that I've had because of the people who, of all the people who didn't want me to succeed and didn't want me to perform and didn't want me to have stage time, like, when it's people like you who are actively part of supporting that and, really helping to like lift me up and give me the opportunities, like I cannot even begin to express how impactful and meaningful that is to me. And like how I just, I want to see everybody succeed. I know what a lot of people think about any producer is going to struggle when there's people who aren't really at the level to be on a show. But I do truly want everybody to succeed. It's just, sometimes it's really tough to be the one who's like, I want you to succeed, but you're not succeeding right now, so you don't really have the opportunity. It's a really hard thing.
A sentence I really like for this particular context is just like, I am not comfortable putting you on for this amount of time. And that's it. Like, I think it kind of like pushes people to be like, oh, like, why don't you feel comfortable with me being on the stage for that amount of time, rather than starting with like a you statement of like, you're not good enough yet. Like, I want that to be like, hey, like, I don't feel comfortable like putting you on for that much time. This much time I'm willing to do for you. This much time more than that is a risk for me that I'm not comfortable with. And substantively, I think it is the same thing, but I think there's like a level also of like, it's not personal. I've never like not had someone on a show out of like for personal reasons,
Yeah. There are people that I have personal problems with, like, for sure, but I've always like really truly felt that, if the comedy is there, if the audience is telling me that they want to see you, I want to put you on stage. It doesn't matter the personal stuff, because at the end of the day, like, it's not the big thing for me as a comedy show is about the audience, not the comics. And like, so all this stuff about like how good I felt performing, et cetera, et cetera. I don't feel that way if the audience isn't having fun. Yeah. Right? Like, I needed a moment after the show. You came to praise me and tell me how much, how proud you were basically of me. And I feel bad in retrospect because I was just like, no, I wasn't good. Don't tell me that right now. Because I was so mad at myself.
Yeah.
And then, the compliments start flooding in from the audience, and it's like, oh, this is really genuine. Like they actually they loved the show tonight, and it allowed me to love the show, and it allows me to really be able to appreciate it. And that's ultimately when you have people who aren't quite ready for that, and you don't have the audience finishing the show, that was the best thing ever. It's that makes it different, but
yeah, I felt so much good vibes coming out of that show, and that to me is such a win.
And it was definitely so different for you because you finished your set and you jumped straight into the audience.
Pretty much.
You also,
I got a drink
totally
first.
Changed things. What did you get to drink?
So I got Negroni, but so here's the thing: is my wallet was on the chair next to the audio recorder, and I couldn't just run out onto the stage and grab my wallet. And then someone was still coming in. I can't remember who it was, but someone was coming in the door, and then another person came in the door after them. And after you commented on the first person, when the second person came in, I was like, this is my chance. I'm gonna run out. So you turned as the other person came in into the venue, and I darted on stage, grabbed my wallet, and got back into the backstage. Did you notice that?
I did not. I did not notice that.
I thought I did my job well, but I needed my wallet to get a drink.
Oh yeah, actually I didn't notice you, but I do remember that that I stopped right as I was starting my set. I stopped because somebody came in, right? It's that moment?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Okay, I remember that.
It was pretty early on, yeah. But for a second I was pacing backstage being do I just not get a drink? Do I just walk right on stage and be sorry, Donnie, I need a drink. I'm getting my wallet.
It would have been funny. Right, everything was working that night. It would have been par for the course.
I would have felt like such an asshole though. I don't want to do that to someone on stage,
I think the one thing I really enjoy, I really enjoy when shit goes wrong. I think I'm really good at when something weird happens, being able to point it out and think on my feet and get something out about the thing going wrong. And I really enjoy, I love that. I love when things go wrong. As long as not my jokes going wrong. If it's something in the stage, if we've been on stage once where the lights went off and I was performing in pitch black. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
That was so much fun. So that stuff's always good. So you felt like the show was so good that it reinvigorated your passion for comedy, and you're going to get on another show soon?
It reminded me why I like comedy, which is just, it's a rush when it works. And I think beyond that, I think it's really easy if you're just grinding through open mics to just let that go to your head as this is, the level of comedian I am. And I think that's why a lot of people don't push through that. But I also think about it in terms of incentives. It's what kind of messed up person do you have to be to just willingly push through all that to finally come out to the chosen lands where things are actually good.
What are you saying about me right now?
I'm saying that when you're in the trenches of trying to get into comedy, trying to break through, you're in the trenches. And when you finally get out, comedy suddenly becomes rewarding. And so again, I'm in it for the community. I enjoy doing it. I'm not going to crawl through trenches to do it though. And so this gave me a sense of you know what, there is a way that we can still do this. And I can, you're an amazing comic. I think what you're saying earlier, that Chinese comics performing in China in English absolutely can do it out here. Yeah. And so what you've done is you've shown me a way in which I could see this still happening. The host also did grab my contact information and, mentioned the idea of like maybe doing another show sometime. And I was like, maybe I can also skip some of the trenches here.
You should,
Yeah.
man. You're so good. It's how I've always felt it. And also I think like what makes me love your show is like I know what traditional stand-up comedy is supposed to look like. I like traditional stand-up comedy. You do the thing that is so hard to do, which is you do your own version of your jokes. It's like people, when you have traditional stand-up comedy, a lot of times it feels like you pick up that joke that's written and anybody can read it because the logic is really strong and everybody's going to laugh. But your jokes don't feel that way. Your jokes feel uniquely you. I try really hard to make my jokes feel uniquely me. That nobody else in China, nobody else in Canada, nobody else in New York City can pick up my jokes and get on stage and tell them and get laughs the way I get laughs. Not to say, like, maybe some of my jokes, maybe somebody else could do them better. Who knows? But, like, you have that thing that makes you uniquely you, and so many comedians are missing that. So when you told me, for example, like, you're basically retired, and I asked if you want to do the show, and your response kind of hurt me. So I'll tell you guys, I asked Jacob if he would do the comedy show, and he's just like, I don't have to. It's like if you want to give me the time, I appreciate it, but like don't feel pressure to put me on. And I think in most comedians' hearts, that kind of hurts. It's like, oh, you're getting stage time for the show, and you feel not ambivalent about it. Like you feel like really apathetic towards it. And that's how it felt.
A certain amount of that was a little bit of just like this Canadian politeness thing where it's like, okay, like I want to, but I don't want to burden someone else. And so there is a little bit of that.
It was already being offered. It was already like, I was already like, hey, I kind of want to do this. Do you want it? Like,
yeah. Well, like I also knew that you had to like talk to the producers about it and like say like, hey, can we find stage time for this guy? And like, so I wanted basically no to still be an option that wasn't like really uncomfortable or something.
So are you saying when people offer me things, I should stop saying, oh, great, that would be amazing. Thank you. Should I be more like, you don't have to give it to me.
I just like wasn't totally sure that it was like a full, like a thing you could like fully be offering. Right.
Yeah.
Because I knew there were other like stakeholders in this who had to like kind of have some say in it. And so it's like, yeah, like I'm happy to do it. I just do need to know ahead of time so I can get ready.
Fair. All right, then.
I'm really glad you offered it to me, and I'm really glad I did it.
It was amazing. It was so amazing, right? Like it was
fun.
Great.
Well, like honestly, what it did to me is because that was like 7 minutes, which means like still tight 5 territory. It made me like yearn for the harder territories where like you have to start weaving a little bit and like working with whatever the audience is that night, because I think those are the real rushes, the ones where you're like, oh, I don't know how my material is going to work with this group, I don't know how to navigate this quite yet, but let's go for it. And like when those moments work, those are like the biggest rushes for me.
For sure. I feel the same way. And so I want to say I want to give we kind of did this in person, but I kind of want it like on the record. And that sounds
cheating in comedy.
Oh wait, shit! Yeah, let's do that.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do that. What were you saying?
No, I wanted you to tell me how awesome I am for like 10 minutes. This section is called cheating in comedy. So I do want to know. So this week, we talked a lot. I won't name any names of comedians we talked about because it's not really fair to them, and I don't. Maybe one day I'll meet them. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But we talked about this idea of like cheating in comedy, and when I first like asked you about that, how did you interpret what I mean by like this idea of cheating in stand-up comedy?
Well, like doing things that aren't really So it's going to be hard to like go back to my exact thoughts on the matter then.
Hmm.
I would say like using something that isn't stand-up comedy to do a show and then calling it stand-up comedy, I guess, is what I would say now.
Yeah,
But like at that time, I took like a naive view of just like props, musical instruments, magic.
See, I actually, I think I do like those things. I do like those things when they're involved in comedy. So I think you're pretty accurate. Like I've been thinking a lot recently as I watch more comedians, and I watch more people on stage, of this idea of like, I respect what a lot of performers do, but I get a little uncomfortable sometimes when I see like somebody calling their show like stand-up comedy, and they, for example, if it's a musician, it's not like they're just telling jokes with their guitar. It's like they're making their guitar and like it's almost like the music is the focal point over the comedy. And like if jokes don't work, it's fine because people are still enjoying the music. It's clever. It sounds good. Like that's where like I get into this place where I'm like, that's kind of cheating. You know, if the jokes are there, if it's stand up like with guitar, I feel like that's one thing. But you know, it's like if it's some stand up, a lot of guitar, I'm like, should that person have 5 minutes when they only got like 4 big laughs, but in between those big laughs, everybody was happy because there was music being played? Like, so ultimately, like, how do you like? I guess what are your kind of overall? Do you did I sway you at all that there's like cheaters, or do you still kind of like do you feel like it's stand up is stand up, and you know, however you get the laughs, and it doesn't really matter? Like I don't know. I do want to after.
So I'm happy to like let everyone perform what they're going to perform. I think my issue is going to be calling it stand up comedy, and I think really the only place it's ultimately going to matter that much is in whatever basements or attics people are in when they start talking about who their favorite comedians are. And someone's going to bring up a magician. That's when people are going to be like, let's talk about being purists in comedy. So like my only issue would be like with people packaging like a magic show as a comedy show. And if they are then, you know, competing for comedy awards, all those many lucrative comedy awards that don't exist, you know, so then it's like annoying.
One of the comedians we spent a long time talking about last week, multiple times, and it is a comedian I love. He has won numerous awards at festivals and stuff. And that's where I think like it's kind of cheating.
Okay. You know? Let's talk about that a little bit. I think one thing is if they're using a different canvas. So we mentioned the canvas that like is like the social atmosphere of stand-up comedy, and it's just like the mood or the vibes in the room and how you work with those to get a laugh. But I think there's a lot of shows that like obviously border on music, on theatrics, like theatrical productions. And so if you're getting like fringe shows, of course, there's going to be so much overlap. There are people who are doing like theatrical styles of comedy where they're having like some really, you know, tragic, dramatic moments in the middle of the show, and they're running on to tell a story rather than like doing a straight stand-up comedy thing. And they'll be like, I guess, in the same category as someone who's just doing like total improv crowd work with a few punchlines here and there. And I think, like, is it cheating? I think like the only dishonesty in it would be just being like, this is pure stand-up comedy. But I have absolutely no objection with people having like musical comedy. I have no objection to people. I have no objection to magicians using comedy in their acts. I do have objections to magicians doing magic and calling it comedy, because I think they're working with surprise, shock, and awe with the magic of like, how the hell did they do that? That's the medium they're really working with sometimes. And often the magic is playing a secondary role, or the comedy is playing a secondary role in that. And that's like one place where I might object of like, don't have comedians competing with that for like comedy stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I watched a guy who's a magician and he's a comedian as well. He does both, and like I do think it's really funny. But it's like he's like, one of the jokes is very simple. It's just like, okay, we're going to get you. This is a black scarf. This is a black scarf. All right, I'm going to put it in my hand, and it's going to be there's going to be a new scarf. He puts the black scarf in his hand, and then he goes into his backpack and he takes out a new scarf. Yeah, and it's like, oh, that's funny, because like you think he's going to do a trick, but he doesn't, do a trick.
Yeah, that's a joke.
It's a joke, but it's also like it's not stand-up jokes though, right? It's like,
well, that I would say is still a joke, because the whole point of that punchline is that punchline, and you can have like props that are going to like be part of the content of your set. I have no issue with that, really. But
it's
if
funny,
you then,
it's funny. Like I laugh. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, like what all I'm saying is like the next part where he does a magic trick that no one can figure out how he did it, that is really amazing. And then you can ride that high into like more jokes and stuff. It's similar, I think, to the music, where it's like, well, even if the comedy doesn't work, there's still the safety net of the magic of the music. These are all amazing skills that I don't have, and I respect them quite a lot. But I think that subsequently it takes away the safety net, or like rather it adds a safety net that doesn't exist in pure comedy, which I'm not trying to like privilege pure comedy over everything else, but it's like, it is a different experience.
Yeah, I would have related to like, it's like playing a video game, but you turn off the setting where you die. Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you have unlimited lives.
Although I will say, having like a set where you fail at the comedy and at the music is pretty brutal.
I haven't seen it. You've done it, right? You've done it.
Failed in that way, like and I've seen other people fail in that way, and my goodness, it's uncomfortable.
It's a double whammy. I usually see like people enjoy, but I guess, if you're not good at the guitar and you try to play guitar on stage.
That's the thing. It's all the people who aren't that good at comedy and aren't that good at music who try to do music comedy. You never saw them.
No, I haven't. That's true. That's true. Good point.
They didn't make it out that far where you got to see you're seeing the survivors here.
That's an excellent point. But there is something to be said for, when we get on stage and we do have a joke bomb, and then having to recover, like you said, having to have the wherewithal to know, like, I just made this room go dead. Mm-hmm. I got to get this back. Yeah. I feel like, when you're doing, I don't want to say props, because I think props are fine, but I do think like music in particularly, you remove that fear, you remove that pit, like from that, like you're always going to land on your feet. It kind of feels like,
it's a good parachute.
And it also, the thing that music does usually is the music sets up the punchline, right? Like a lot of times people are playing the music, and then when they get to the punchline, they stop and look at the audience, and the audience knows, like, oh, we're supposed to laugh here. Like, it's kind of like manipulative, right?
So
but
let's take that for a second and pause. And if you knew that music would make your show more enjoyable for the audience, would you add it?
That's a really great question. I can't sing. I've never even considered the possibility that I could do that. I did when I was in Malaysia. I was performing at a place called Red Garden for 500 people. And I was 10 minutes into my show, and a guy starts yelling, "Sing a song!" Sing a song!
That's a fun heckle.
Oh my God, he was booing me off stage. He yelled, "We want to hear music, not see someone talk." And it's like, this is not supposed to be talking, okay? This is supposed to be comedy. But I can't sing. Would I do it to make it more enjoyable? I want to say no. Because music might make my audience feel happier, but I don't I can't see where music would help my comedy. I can't see where I would include it, or like how my jokes
Mhm.
would benefit from it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think music works really well when you're like surprising the audience with like a traditional song and they kind of can guess where it's going to go, and then
Mhm.
you subvert expectations, or like you're doing like a kind of Weird Al thing where like you're just playing with the words of a song to be like to fit something that's kind of comedy. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's like comedy, but it's like an alternative comedy.
Well, to do some
I
positive shout outs real quick, I really like how like in Chongqing, Scottish Luke has
Scottish
guitars
Luke
that
is
he
great.
uses to like make his comedy. But like that's the thing, it's in service to the comedy. It's
Yeah.
not in service to the music. And I think Kurt Dunsing also did the same thing.
Oh yes, definitely.
Where like if there was music, it was absolutely in service to the comedy, and I really enjoyed it. It didn't become about the music.
I totally agree with that. I saw both of them. I actually hosted for Kurt in Beijing, and it was fantastic to listen to him talk about the Twin Towers with a little guitar, or was it a ukulele or a guitar?
Probably a uke.
Yeah, I think it was a ukulele.
He had a
But it
uke
might
in
have been a
Chengdu.
guitar. Then yeah, definitely a ukulele. And Scottish Luke opened for me in Chongqing, and that was great. I love that guy. He was very funny. But yeah, cheating in comedy, guys. Cheating in comedy, and the myth of the Type 5. Those are going to be my new segments going forward.
Sure.
I'm having so much fun talking to you. I always have so much fun talking to you. I don't know who's going to be listening to this. This is going to be, I've got, some, the podcast at the Citadel. There's a couple recordings that I've already done. They haven't been released yet. I'm probably going to release this one unedited, unfiltered. Just go for it. And so if anybody here is still listening, like I appreciate you listening.
Literally, this isn't live. It's like live. We're recording, but there's no broadcast.
I'm talking to the people who's gonna be listening when I post it. Okay.
So, maybe we need to edit it now.
Maybe we do. No, we'll leave it in. We'll leave it in. So to you guys who are listening to this, like I really appreciate it, because this one is a bit more personal than what the other ones are, and what the other ones are going to continue to be. This is going to be my first one, and it's really kind of about me. And,
when is it not?
When is it not? But I do want kind of like on the record a little bit is just like I say that kind of tongue in cheek. What you really had a strong impact on me when the show finished, and you really started to praise me. And I don't know if you want to put that out there like for like the world to hear, but like for me, when the show finished and you came over and you were talking to me, and you kind of gave me a big hug, and you're just like, Donnie, like what you're fucking doing is amazing. I love this. Like I gotta say, I am somebody who doesn't seek respect from most people. I'm somebody who like people are like, why don't you try to be nice to this person or get this person to like you, or why aren't you like kowtowing to this person, or like you gotta go praise that person. I'm like, fuck that. Like I have no interest in it. And but I do have interest in getting respect from people who I really really love and have a great deal of respect for, and you're one of them. And so like for you not only to open and the show for me and be part of it, and to let me into your home while I was waiting after the show, you really said a lot of very very kind things to me and really supported me. And I gotta say, I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to keep trying to do this as much as I can for both myself and for the Comedy Citadel and for Chinese comedy as a whole. But you everything you've done really means a lot, and I really appreciate it. I fucking love you, man. And you being here tonight with me after you finished a long day of work and recording with me, everything. It's very meaningful.
Well, I love you. I love what you do. I think you're absolutely like, you're the only ones who's had the audacity to do anything like this, and you're absolutely right to be doing it. Like this is such like it's a typical Donnie thing to be like, I think this can happen. Everyone's like, I don't know about that, and then you just go and do it, and then it works. And I don't know. I don't like just hand out praise. Like I keep the inflation on my praise low. Put it that way. So it's not fluff. I really do mean these things, and I was so impressed with what you're able to do in Toronto, and I loved having you. Very happy
we're gonna
we
keep
did
doing
this.
We're gonna keep doing this. We're gonna keep doing shows in Toronto. I'll be there every week at Second City. You guys can find me. No, I'm kidding. I really hope this is not like, for me. I don't. The weird thing for me going forward, as comedy gets becomes even a bigger and bigger part of my life, is going to be like this idea that I'm only going to see certain people like once every 2 or 3 years, and they're going to be people I care about, because I'm noticing, like, by touring, you go and you meet awesome people. Yeah. Right? Like we've got Ian running comedy in Shanghai, and I haven't seen Ian in a year. Maybe a year and a half. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, like that's just normal in this field. Yeah. That people you really love and respect, you don't necessarily get to see all the time. And I am somebody who really clings to people that I love and care about. And so I hope this becomes something we can kind of do, we can do again within a year, or maybe around a year. I would love to be back with you. And do you have anything for the audience? Anything to plug? You have any new the talk show episodes coming up soon, or?
We released one a little bit before the tour. Nothing really going on with me on that front. I still have to figure out the balancing act of life in Toronto, what that looks like for me. But
where can people find you on social media?
Oh, please don't. Don't find me on social media. It's just me and my friends, and I don't like or respond to anything.
Where can people find you? You live at, what is it, 135 East Mountain Drive?
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Just put something onto the internet being like, we want Jacob Wanuch to perform at this show or something, and a bat signal, and if I'm paying attention...
Yeah, Jacob Wanuch, little known fact, he Googles his name every day waiting for opportunity.
Not a lot of results lately.
Fair enough. All right, Jake.
Whatever. You know what, though? When I am feeling like that's, if I feel like it's time for me to go and start making things and trying to make waves again, I'll let people know.
We'll love that. We'll love that. We look forward to it. I look forward to it, man. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is Donnie Fan.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for chatting.
I have been Donnie Fan. Nope.
No, that was just a joke. I'm done.
I have been Donnie Fan at the podcast at the Citadel. Thanks for listening, guys. You're awesome. See you guys next time.